The following program is brought to you by the Hackenberg Financial Group.
Back at about the 10.
Do you have to shoot fouls in tournament play, or are you just out of business? That's all.
Your family deserves nothing less.
So now it'll be fourth and goal to go.
They shoot well, they do a lot of things very well, and we think they're a real sound ball team.
WHBC in Canton.
33-31, south by 2, up court to Gonzalez. Gonzalez down over the center line.
17 to go.
Welcome to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg with my co-host for today's special program, Ron Lemmo. Ron, welcome back to the Time Machine. Always enjoy doing this with you.
Well, thanks for having me, Larry. Today's a special day because Scott was somebody special to me, too.
Well, we have a tribute to Scott Gephart, a friend to all of us. I think a friend to everyone who ever met him. And it's going to be a great 90-minute program as we're able to summarize the great life of one of Canton's finest, Scott Gephart.
I'm just glad to be here. He was a wonderful guy.
We'll be going through the years of Scott here, starting off over in the Fairmont neighborhood.
Fighting torches, man.
Something you're quite familiar with, but we have childhood friends who certainly played with Scott, not just in the sports realm, but in another one of Scott's great loves, that being music. We're going to be joined by Doug Babb, Tom Merriman, the original Fairmont Boys Band, which I loved hearing play out at Lobies. Scott had invited me and really enjoyed listening to those guys. We, in fact, played some music on Sports Time Machine as background music because of our relationship with Scott. The story continues as we talk about Scott's career at Canton McKinley. An interesting career, not probably what most people would think, but interesting no less. And some great years at Malone College. And we're going to be joined by assistant basketball coach Steve Reinhardt, who was there at the scene of one of the great upsets in the history of basketball in the United States as the Little Malone Pioneers knocked off the number one team in the country in the NIA tournament. We're going to be joined by one of Scott's closest friends and one of those Malone teammates, a guy who just seemed inseparable with Scott. You saw them together so many times, that being Phil Marzik. I'm sure Phil will be interesting to listen to, Ron.
Well, he was when he was on the show before, so this should be a lot of fun today.
Scott had this great run there with the Malone team. Was a national qualifier in track, and we'll be talking about that some, but probably is known more as an athlete in Stark County as a slow-pitch softball player. Did you ever see him play, Ron?
Yeah, I did. Even though I was involved more with the baseball end of it, I saw Scott play numerous times, and man, what a stud he was. He could hit the ball a long way.
Well, we have some of his closest softball teammates, guys that played with him, got to know him so well, during many, many years. Ted Majestic will be joining us, Joe Monette, Mike Bedell. Is that how you say that last name, Joe? Or Ron?
Yeah, Mike Bedell.
And then finally, we'll be talking about a fundraiser to honor Scott's memory. And provide college scholarship, an event coming up in November. And to help us talk about that event, we have his band members from his most recent band, the Old School Rockers, and that will be interesting as well, Ron.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great time.
Thanks for helping me do this, Stefan. I wanted to get our Who Am I out of the way right before we went to break here. Who Am I is going to be Who Was He for today. And this is brought to you by Kennedy's Barbecue and Taggart's. Who was he? Although he became a prominent high school football coach at Minerva High School, his playing sport was basketball. setting the career scoring record at Malone College in the 1960s, a record that stood until Mark Klein surpassed it in the 1970s. He was a Lincoln graduate, and he passed away in 2010. Who was he? Call Matt Hackenberg if you think you know the answer. We're going to be giving away gift certificates to Kennedy's Barbecue and to Taggart's. You can reach Matt at 450-1480. That's 450-1480. The time machine will be back in just a moment.
Where's the time machine going to take us today?
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Welcome back to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg, and I'm joined by the Fairmont boys. My co-host, Ron Lemmo.
And torches.
And other Fairmont boys, Doug Babb and Tom Merriman. Doug and Tom, you guys very close with Scott, right there in these early years together. First of all, where is Fairmont? Where is that in town?
Fairmont is the area between Harmont and Richmond Avenues and 30th Street and Mahoning Road northeast. And along Fairmont Boulevard sits Fairmont School, where we all went to grade school, of course. And me and my buddy Tom here grew up with Scott on Fletcher Avenue there in that neighborhood. And our friend Ron, who we prefer to call Duddy, he's also a Fairmont guy. But me and Tom were very close growing up with Scott. Well, I like to tell people, we literally knew him since we were old enough to walk and talk, since you could walk down the street. You know, we knew Scott. And
I probably met him when I was about 5 years old. And soon after that, we were hanging out.
Do you remember the first time?
I don't remember the first time, but I remember the first year. I just remember hanging out more and more each day until the point that we just hung out every day. And there were times when he would come over and get me in the morning, and I don't ever remember coming home and eating until dark, and we'd finally go home. And
now, you live right across the street from each other there?
Corner from me, yeah.
Doug, your first memory of meeting Scott?
oh, gee, that's hard to say. I mean, it goes back so long, you know. But the sports that we played when we were old enough to start playing sports, I mean, there were a group of about.
When do you think you started? At what age? And what did you guys gravitate to first and most?
It was like, oh, God, we did so much stuff back then, you know. But like
I would say about the age of 8 is when we started playing a little bit of sports, and then when Little League started on Mighty Mites, when we started playing Mighty Mites, then we played baseball every day. And I actually liked it when the coaches used to say back then, they used to tell us, hey, we have a big game today, don't you guys get wore out? So Scott would give us a break so we'd go watch the Indians play and lay around on the living room floor and not have to play baseball from morning until dark. But yeah, Scott just loved sports. That was his first love. And
now, you were 1 year younger, and I think Doug 2 years younger?
1 year older.
1 year older, and Doug 2 years younger.
Yeah.
I was 1 year older, but he was the main man on the street.
Well, that was the first organized thing. Like Tom was saying, the baseball thing, we all played baseball. But we did a lot of different things. Like Scott would be, like Tom, we was talking about this the other day. In the wintertime, Scott would be the first guy up in the morning to shovel the driveway off to play basketball. You know?
You couldn't feel your hands after an hour, but you still played basketball.
And we all had, as a result of, you know, all the different sports we played together, I mean, we were inseparable, all of us. There were about 8 of us guys on the block that were just inseparable.
Any of the other guys' names come to mind?
Oh, yeah, I know them all. But
Mike Dunn,
who passed away a few years ago. Daryl Gash, Harry Nyman, Doug and Jeff Collins.
Yeah.
Larry, all these guys, they're about 5 years younger than me, but we all hung out at the playground playing sports down there. I can still remember Scott was this tall, gangly guy that when I saw him years later, I couldn't believe what he had turned into. But I remember all these guys from down at the playground up at Harmont, just places where everybody got together to play.
You know, 1960s, we're talking about the biggest part of your youth.
Right.
We're talking baby boom, and this sounds like such a great neighborhood it sounds like one I lived in where every house had, at least a couple kids, and you always had people to interact with. You could always put a game together.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was our goal. Usually in the morning, we'd go out looking for other guys to get a pickup game going of anything, whatever the sport was of the sport of the day, the sport of at that time.
Yeah,
eight in the morning.
Yeah.
8 in the morning till whenever Mama said you had to be home.
And like I said, I don't even remember coming home and eating sometimes.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely.
just constant playing.
Welcome to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg, Ron Lemmo, with our special guests Doug Babb and Tom Merriman, as we pay tribute to one of Canton's finest and certainly one of the greatest guys, Scott Gephart. As a kid, was Scott as nice a kid as he became as an adult?
Absolutely.
Yes, without a doubt, yeah.
Never a change in Scott.
I met Scott at the Hall of Fame Fitness Center, and we didn't really know who each other were initially, and then started to figure that out. But he was great with nicknames. I wondered for a long time if he knew my name, because he always called me Larry Bird, or he would call me Joe Walsh, and always with that big grin that made you feel like you were special to him. But I know he did that probably with everybody. So that was like a character trait of his that you guys witnessed as a little kid?
Yeah, he still called me Cakes. Because we used to call each other by our mom's name. And my mom was Patty, so it became Patty Cakes.
Oh, my God.
Did he have a nickname for you, Doug?
Well, it wasn't so much a nickname. He would just, like you say, we used to kind of make fun of how our parents would call us home and stuff, so he would do a good imitation of my dad, back then. He would still do it even as adults once in a while, just for a laugh.
I still have a message on my phone from him. He used to talk like my dad. Hey, Tom. That's when he never said hello. Hey, Tom. That's how he always, when he called me, that was his greeting.
Well, guys, this bond that we have with the people in our neighborhoods growing up back there in the 60s, many times just built around sport, and that can be so strong. But in your guys' case, it superseded that because somewhere along the line you discovered a love for music. And we want to talk about that. When did you guys figure out, hey, we can make some music?
Well, I always was into music. I was probably the first one that really got into music. And then me and Scott actually had a band when we were 12, 13 years old called the Thunderbirds. We found the name in a magazine. We seen the car. We liked it, so we called ourselves the Thunderbirds. We learned 2 songs, Wipeout, Tijuana Taxi. Played it for his sister and 2 other neighborhood kids, and that was our
band of 2.
Band of 2.
And what did you guys? What was the musical makeup of the
trumpet and drums? Yeah, that was it.
Well, Scott would parlay that trumpet into the school marching band, right, at McKinley?
Yes. Yeah, well, we were in the band together, actually. Yes.
Doug, how about you? When from a musical standpoint, did you guys bond?
Well, I started a little later playing guitar. I had interest in guitar, and I probably started playing when I was around 18. And we were always close, as you know. And so when we got a little older, Scott had an interest in wanting to learn the bass. And he asked me about it, asked me some questions and stuff. And at the time, I was between bands. I wasn't playing. And so he wanted to play. I said, sure, Scott, come on over. And we just started playing, like, regularly. And that's how we all got into it. And eventually, Scott he knew all the material, and he just fit right in, and we got another thing going. And at that point, then Scott pretty much took over the band,
Mind you, he had not played from high school until in his 50s. He had not played any instruments. And it only took him a year of almost every day working at it to get to the point that he went from not playing at all to playing on stage in a band.
I was really starting to get to know Scott 2008, 2009, and it was at that time where he was looking towards retirement, but he was really kind of rebooting himself, and this interest in music, and he was starting to like relearn this time that you're talking about. So we would talk, and then before I knew it, he was saying, hey, we got this band going. It's the Fairmont Boys. I'd like for you to come and listen to us, which I did over at Lobies. And this Fairmont Boys band, Ron, they were out of sight.
Sure were.
And I can remember, watching and listening to Doug as a lead singer and Tom on drums. Man, they were good. Loved the music.
Loved it.
Paul Oswald was another guy in that band. He was another Fairmont guy.
Paul lived right across the street from me.
Another
His
one of
brother
the.
John and I were very close.
We struggled with the name Fairmont Boys too. I do want to mention that, and we discussed it over and over again because it's such a iconic term in that neighborhood. We didn't think that we were the Fairmont Boys. We wanted to honor that name of a group of just rotating people that came out of that neighborhood.
Well, it was the love we had for that area at the time. You know, you hear people talk about Cedar Tech. They couldn't hold a candle to the Fairmont gang.
Hey, we need to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Scott at Canton McKinley High School, the old Canton McKinley, I believe. Back in just a moment.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Welcome back to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg with my co-host Ron Lemmo as we pay tribute to the great Scott Gephart, who we lost just this year and only months ago. Ron, I had the great pleasure to get to know Scott pretty well. I had the great pleasure of having him on a previous show. It was about the 7th or 8th one we ever did here. And was able to learn quite a bit about Scott as far as Canton McKinley High School went. Well, this isn't the new McKinley. It's the real one, the old one down there.
It's the real one, exactly, on Market Avenue. Don't ever forget that either. Larry, I'm going to turn the tables here. I'm going to kind of interview you. What did you get out of this interview with Scott?
Well, as a basketball player, as a coach myself, I have seen... time and time again, you have kids, high school kids, who are, they have bad timing. They grow up too late. They mature late. And it certainly sounds like Scott was a classic late developer. He shared on our previous program that he had gone to a football game with a friend, and as they watched the game there at Fawcett Stadium, Scott had told his buddy, you know, I was a 4-year letterman out there on that field. And he said he let it go for a little while, came back a little bit later and said, in the band. So he didn't play football. He said, yeah, I had 2 nicknames in high school, and they were things like stick figure and twig. Slim, probably, because he really was a very slender. And when you look at his son, Cody, who we're going to be talking about, these are guys that they're very thin. And when you talk about to some of the old McKinley coaches like a Dan Brooks, they don't remember him like what we knew as this physical specimen, as you say, Ron, stud.
Larry, I can remember coming back from college. It had to be my junior, senior year, and going down to Fairmont Playground, and here was Scott. I could not believe what this guy turned into at that point. He was just starting to develop. Malone time. He just became an awesome figure, really.
McKinley, Scott shared the story of his basketball career. He had not gone out for basketball. He got to be a senior, probably had started to grow height-wise, and he was playing in an independent league, and some of the McKinley players were reffing the game. They said, hey, you got to try out for the team. They talked to Coach Rupert for him. Rupert brought him out and had him, as a tryout, play one-on-one against the best JV basketball player. Scott won. So he got his chance to start practicing with Bob Rupert's varsity team, but Rupert cut him.
Yeah.
After a week or so, after they had dismissed a couple players from the team, they invited him back, and Scott spent that season with the Bulldogs, 71, 72 probably. And I asked Scott, well, you probably were real heavily recruited to play basketball at Malone. And, of course, that drew a big laugh because he really didn't get on the floor very much at all for the Bulldogs. A little bit of baseball. He was on that great team.
That undefeated team.
Undefeated team there for Dan Brooks. He was, I think, mostly a pitcher, and then played some for Bernie Hall, who replaced Dan Brooks as the coach in the later years. But certainly not a star athlete at Canton McKinley. But I think that's such a great part of the story because things were about to change once he would get up there to Malone College and develop into his adult body.
Yeah, and he developed into it, that's for sure.
So as we proceed here, we're going to be talking about a great track career there at Malone, but most of all, being a part of this great Malone basketball team, which he was a part of for 4 years, but in particular, the 1974-75 Pioneers, who would shock the world with one of the great upset wins in the history of basketball.
That was against Kentucky State, Larry?
Kentucky State.
Where was that game played?
Well, it was in the Kemper Arena out in Kansas City, and we're going to get full details because we're going to be joined by assistant coach Steve Reinhardt and then teammate Phil Marzik. The Time Machine will be back in just a moment. Stay tuned for Billy J. and Sports Shorts.
Oh, great.
Oh, no.
You love it, Ron.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
I wonder if he'll be having anything to say about Duddy Lemmo.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Back in just a moment. I'm sorry, Ron. I apologize for
baby.
this.
Brings nightmares.
Hello, Larry. Hello, Ron, the dud. And hello, everybody. This is Billy J. with Sports Shorts. Well, you guys, this is unbelievable. International soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo is now officially the first athlete to have over 100 million followers on his Facebook page. 100 million followers. And the really amazing part is this. Every single follower must click in onto his Facebook page with their feet. And Larry, 40-year-old Los Angeles Laker guard Steve Nash is hurt already. Yeah, he hurt his back while lifting luggage. Can you believe it? However, the Laker coaching staff is not upset with Nash. They're upset with Kobe Bryant. They told Kobe 3 times, don't put too much heavy stuff in your luggage. And finally, Larry, you know, I can't do all sports all the time. Every once in a while, I must weigh in on a topic so huge that the 3 people who actually listen to Sports Shorts...
You don't really have to.
Oh, yeah, I do. Want to know what I think. For example, Ebola. People, calm down. Everybody now thinks all Liberians have Ebola. Larry, they don't. I checked out 2 books a week ago, and I feel fine. You can still go to the library, people. And, hey, you know what? Before I go, look, with all these people here, I don't know if you're going to find the time, but Lemmo just got back from a trip to Israel. And if you get a chance, have him tell the story about he went and visited the Wailing Wall and stood there for 3 hours with a harpoon. And this has been Billy J. with Sports Shorts.
You know, I'm ashamed to say I got a degree from the same university that he does. But if there's one thing I'd like to say, though, when we had Terry Moore on and we talked about Terry breaking Bill's assist in a game record, well, I really never remembered Billy passing the ball that much in college. So I went back and looked. Terry broke the record that Bill had of assists in a game with 2. So, what kind of record is that?
Sorry, Terry.
The preceding program, Billy J. and Sports Shorts, does not necessarily represent the opinions or is endorsed by Sports Time Machine or its advertisers. Let's face reality, the guy's an idiot.
Sounds like This engine has a cold weather problem.
Welcome back to the Sports Time Machine. Larry Hackenberg with my co-host Ron Lemmo. The Format Clevenger Gordon Funeral Home has been serving Stark County since 1918 and is pleased to help preserve our precious memories. Canton McKinley. Dave Cady retired after the 94-95 season with a career varsity basketball coaching record of 207 and only 37 losses. Cady coached memorable Bulldogs such as Tim Jackson, Terry Jackson, Bill Robinson, Mike Hawkins, Eric Snow, Bryant Bowden, and Che Bryant. Brought to you by the Format Clevenger Gordon Funeral Home. A special shout-out to one of our great sponsors, Spencer Gordon, who is recovering quickly from some surgery.
Well, get well, Spencer. Dear friend, good person.
Great guy. Well, we kind of got Scott out of Canton McKinley, Ron. He goes to Malone, I think primarily to try to be a baseball pitcher for the great baseball coach Bob Starcher.
The best.
But in the meantime, it's fall, no baseball. He decides to try out for the basketball team without any stellar credentials there at McKinley. And a person who can certainly probably just picture this happening at that time is his coach, Steve Reinhardt. Steve, welcome to the Sports Time Machine.
Thanks, Larry.
Can you remember the tryouts or open gyms or whatever was going on in the early 70s there when you would have laid eyes on Scott for the first time?
Well, I first heard of Scott through Coach Bowerman. He said there's this kid from McKinley that he knew it was a good program at McKinley, and he said he hadn't played much, but he had a lot of potential, and he wanted me to work with him and during the season and whatever, and we did that. And Scott made an impression because he was about 6'4.5". He could move for a guy his size, even though he hadn't filled out quite then. But the next year or so, he really developed as a player and as a person with the rest of the team. And that's what it was all about with Scott, the team.
Probably in that sophomore year, maybe was when he was starting to fill out, you might say. Right. By the time he was a junior, he was a stud.
Well, what happened, too, was Bowerman was pretty innovative in his time, and that was when people were just beginning to start with weight programs for the basketball teams and whatever, and we started a weight program for our team that very summer before that. And Scott was one of those guys that when he started picking up the weights, he just kept picking up more and more, and his body developed better and better, and he just naturally had the body to fill it in with all that muscle and coordination.
4-year player there at Malone. You get some time as a freshman. Bowerman and Reinhardt, they flat out did some recruiting because you're bringing guys in from North Carolina, guys like Ben Tillman, guys like Charles Cox. Your work in Stark County with guys who maybe tried to go D1 and found out that maybe wasn't
the
because you pick up Larry Arrington from Massillon.
Right. Larry was another story, but Bowerman was also a recruiter, and myself included with him, was he said, don't be afraid to go talk to the guys that were Division I players. And we did talk to all the Division I players that we saw, and consequently, Ben and Charles were both first-team All-North Carolina. Charles made them forget about David Thompson for a game in the North Carolina All-Star game, which is, if you remember, David Thompson. But and then Phil Marzik, who came from Akron Garfield from a junior college, Phil Hodge and Ben, and Mark Klein, the All-American, led the state of Ohio in Division I scoring at the time. So we had a great team, and Scott became one of those guys. They all became a great team because they played together during the summers, during the winters, off-season. They were friends together throughout all that time also.
Special group of guys. I'm not sure I got to see your teams play because I was coaching at that time, but I got to see all those guys later as they were graduating. We're talking middle to late 70s. I'm still trying to play basketball, but now I'm getting into my late 20s. thinking that I can still play, but I've lost more than a step or two. And you go to these independent tournaments, and it was a bad night when you had to play against Dave Williams. And, of course, they're loaded up with all these Malone guys and anybody else who was a great player they seemed to put on those teams. But the 74-75 team is the one that I wanted us to focus on. Scott was not a starter, but he was certainly a rotation guy. I could tell that when I interviewed Jay Bowerman, Jay loved Scott as just one of those guys. He referred to him as a glue guy. Can you comment?
Well, sure. Scott was our first guy off the bench, actually, for our big men. And even though he was 6'4.5", he was 225 pounds, and he could hold his own against any of the big guys. And I know when we played Kentucky State that year in the NAIA tournament, Scott got the pleasure of going in, and he had to guard the 7-foot center. So Scott did the things it took for the team to win. His job was to go in and check him off the boards, and I'm sure after the game the guy knew he was checked off the boards because Scott did that part of the job. And that team was just a team you'd be hard to describe. Mark Klein scoring 41 points and beating the team that was supposed to get an invitation to the National Invitational Tournament that year was really something. I think that's why it was considered such a big upset. Kentucky State was supposed to be the first NAIA school invited to the NIT that year, and it didn't happen.
At least two of the guys off that team would go on to NBA careers. I think Gerald Cunningham, if I have that name correctly, and Bates, who maybe even had a longer career as a guard in the NBA. Malone goes 26-5, really good season, beat some Central State, big win in order to get that bid out there. But I had thought that Malone was a 32nd seed. There's 32 teams go. I read the article again that Scott had shared with me way back. Well, they said that Malone was unseeded. But if you're playing the number 1 seed, hey, you're the 32nd seed. Let's face facts. Bowerman said he went into his office into seclusion when he found out for about 5 hours in depression, then started calling around, and you would know this story, Phil. He talked to the coach of Milligan College. Do you recall?
Oh, yes, I remember that really well. And the Milligan College coach gave him hope because we had played Milligan earlier in the season in a tournament, and he said that, hey, you guys can play with them. You just have to play your game. And that's how we approached the game that year. Was we just went out and we enjoyed playing together so much and the competitive things. We were relaxed when we played Kentucky State, and we surprised them and everybody else because we were a small school with 750 kids at the time, and we woke up everybody as to who we were, and they found out. All the teams in Ohio knew who we were that year, but it took that game for everybody nationally to know.
Yeah, you guys had beat those conference teams. You'd beat Ashland, big name there. So we go out there to Kansas City, and I'm thinking about this starting lineup. Charles Cox had come up from North Carolina. Ben Tillman, the physical center that Scott would back up, among other guys. You have Larry Arrington, a lockdown defender. And you have this tremendous shooter from Norton High School by the name of Mark Klein, who would go on to score 41 on this big Kentucky State team. But I haven't mentioned Phil Marzik. We want to talk to Phil, but before we do, describe Phil at that time. As what kind of a team member and also what kind of basketball player?
Well, Phil, when he first came to Malone, it was kind of hard to figure him out because he had played in the streets of Akron. He had played against guys like Gus Johnson and whatever, and he knew how to play basketball. And not only that, he was so easygoing, he just loved the game, and that's where he was at all the time. And Phil, when he came to Malone the first year, he was the one who was one of our leading scorers with Mark Klein, but he gave up some of that when we recruited other players that made us a better team. But Phil was probably the best offensive rebounder and that I've ever seen. And to this day, people would probably still have a hard time checking him off the boards because he always got to the basket and got to the ball. And Phil was just a great team player. Him and Davey Williams and Scott, they've hung around together forever after that, too, as well as that whole team did, and kept playing, as you saw, in the amateur leagues around town. But, no, Phil, he had this huge afro when he first came to Malone, and people were, he was just very different in the way he approached things, and he still is to this day. But what a great guy he is, and he was a great teammate of everybody on the team.
Well, if you're trying to put this in print, the huge afro, you would need to underline or maybe double underline the afro. It was a big one.
Well, if he was as tall as his afro, he'd have been in the NBA.
Absolutely. I got to know those guys kind of together. I knew of them, but really felt like I got to know them. They seemed like two peas in a pod. Very, very close friends. Welcome to the Sports Time Machine, Phil Marzik.
Well, hi, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We've talked about your great team that you were a part of. We've talked a little bit about Kansas City. Your thoughts, first of all, about Scott as a teammate, and then just as a friend.
Well, Scott and I were, since college, we were best friends for the last over 40 years, and Scott was just so easy to get along with. When he first came to Malone, he wasn't real experienced, hadn't played a whole lot of basketball, but he just kept working and playing ball, lifting weights, got bigger and stronger, and he made himself into a really good ball player.
When we talked a little bit about this on a previous show, and we had Coach Bowerman with us, there was so much talk about how physical and how difficult and challenging the practices were, and how Scott would get paired off with Ben Tillman. Does that bring back any memories to you? Or we also have Coach Reinhardt with us here, Phil.
Oh yeah, I heard part of that earlier. Yes, Scott and Ben were very physical, and they went at it with each other. And at times, I would, mix it up with those guys also. And I don't know if Steve remembers this, but I remember Scott caught me with an elbow right between the eyes. Broke my nose there. I had black eyes for a couple of weeks.
Was that part of that blood and guts drill that Scott used to talk about?
It was just a scrimmage we had, regular practice, and he just caught me accidentally, and I was about knocked out on my feet, pretty much. And I had to wear one of those old-fashioned masks there for a few weeks, like an old catcher's mask kind of thing. Very awkward at the time.
So you guys get this bid kind of unexpectedly. You had 5 losses. Kentucky State was so much promoted by the press. I don't think you guys were given much of a chance to win that. Did you have some belief that you guys could go knock them off out there at Kemper Arena, Phil?
Oh, I think we were very confident at the time, because I believe after we started out slow that year, and then I believe Charles came back. After Charles came back and got in the swing of things, we must have won, 17 or 18 games in a row, something like that. So we were very confident, and we knew that we could play with pretty much, anybody out there. We were confident.
Klein's performance out there at Kemper, 41 points. Did you guys intentionally feed him the ball in that game?
I don't think at the beginning. He just got hot, and we kept looking for him, and he had a kind of shot that he could shoot over people, and he got in a groove and just kept firing them up, and they went in. But that was common for Mark, even throughout the year, that he could get on a hot streak and just carry a team, and that's before the 3-point line also. He was throwing in 20, 22 footers. So, it'd have been, I guess looking back with the three-pointer, I don't know what he would have averaged. He could have averaged 30 points a game maybe with a three-point goal.
You're probably right, Phil. And in fact, I still remember that game, and I still remember that one of the things we did against a team like Kentucky State, who had such an aggressive man-to-man defense, is we ran a lot of things where we ran backdoor plays. And
oh, yeah.
You remember that from the 1-4 high, that Mark must have had 4 or 5 baskets just making backdoor cuts because they were overplaying him so bad when he did start hitting.
And I think, with Mark leading the team in scoring, but everybody on the team could score. I mean, it's not like you could leave anybody alone on that team in 75. So I guess in a lot of ways, Mark couldn't get double teamed because everybody else could score. That may have had something to do with it also.
Oh, right. Everybody on that team almost averaged in double figures for that year. And Larry Arrington was our defensive stopper, and he guarded the All-American Cunningham, and he held him in check pretty well. So it was a great season all around.
Larry was so good defensively at 6'6", with long arms and quick, that he was really the only guy in practice that I didn't want to watch me. I mean, he was, you knew when Coach put Larry on you in practice, it was going to be difficult as long as he was on you.
Hey, Phil, thanks for joining us here today. I know we could go on and on about this basketball. We have softball guys coming up. We have the old school rocker band guys coming up. And so we got a number of other things to cover. Maybe we'll do some more on this at another time like you and I have talked about before.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Phil.
Okay. Bye.
Steve, when I interviewed Coach Bowerman, he talked about this team being so special because of how they allowed the coaching staff to push them, and that the key to their success was how well conditioned, how well psychologically they were conditioned. And Coach Bowerman mentioned that he had left Malone, and he ended up coaching at Houston, where he was on that staff when they had Drexler, Elijah Wan, and he said that group, Phi Slamma Jamma, they couldn't hold a candle mentally, physically, to what these Malone guys were. Well,
I don't know about Phi Slamma Jamma, but I know that they were so talented. But our team at Malone was talented in a lot of different ways. They were not only talented as basketball players, but they were so much of the chemistry was so good between everybody that they thought alike. And you took Marzik and Scott and Phil and I'm trying to think, Larry and Ben. You put them together, they were all thinking on the same level all the time. And that's one of Bowerman's strengths, too, is we always ran psychological tests on our players, too, before the season to see what did motivate them.
I hear unselfishness written all over this group.
Oh, I think anybody that's seen them play in the last, even 15 years after, that's all they did. In fact, they were so unselfish, they took in some Walsh players. And they became part of their team, too, in the amateur leagues.
Well, I think we need to take a short break here. We're going to have teammates of Scott in the slow pitch softball, where he excelled for many, many, many years. And then guys from the old school rockers. Steve, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Hope you can stay for the rest of the program.
Okay, I will.
Back in a moment.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Welcome to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg with my co-host Ron Lemmo, as we pay special tribute to one of Canton's finest, Scott Gephart, who we lost just a few months ago. Ron, I know that you had something that you really wanted to share about Scott.
Yeah, I did, Larry. For 20 years, I was on the recreation board, and it's kind of touching because you know what Scott was all about. And talking with umpires on the protest board and all that, after Scott's passing, we get together and talk, and all these umpires had nothing but nice things to say about Scott. And I wondered, with the players, how did he get along on the field with everybody?
Well, Scott was a pretty easygoing guy, but he was very, very competitive. I was lucky. I got to play probably close to 15, 16 years with Scott all over the country. And these two guys will probably tell you also that I've never, ever seen Scott get mad at an umpire, a teammate, even an opposing teammate. That's the way he handled himself with class at all times.
That was Mike Bedell, one of three teammates that we'd asked to join us here today to talk slow pitch softball. We're also joined by Ted Majestic and Joe Monett. Guys, welcome to the Sports Time Machine.
Thanks for having me.
Ted, I'll start with you first. When was it that you began to play slow pitch softball with Scott? How'd that happen?
That was about 1982 or 3. I played on a smaller team, a team not as good as the one that they were on. Mike and Joe played with Scott, and I was lucky enough to be asked to play with him in a tournament, and kind of took off from there. The thing that I remember about Scott the most was he had no ego. He didn't walk around like he was the power hitter that he actually was, and we couldn't wait till he got to bat with in a big time in a game because he was going to knock the guys in.
Scott, at this stage of the game there in the 80s, we had him as a toothpick kind of guy there at McKinley. No toothpick now once we get to this slow pitch softball. I would guess Scott 6'5", 260.
Well, I don't know if he was that big. You think, Bid?
I don't know if he was 260, but the 6'5" is pretty close. He was about 240, pretty solid.
There wasn't any fat on there.
No fat on him at all.
Ted, what position did you play on those teams usually?
I played shortstop early, and then I played in the outfield alongside him there for a while.
If you play long enough, you eventually can be a catcher, you know.
And Scott turned out that way. I didn't make it that long.
I would picture Scott playing outfield and maybe out in the right field with that gun for an arm that he had.
I would say so. That's where he played all his years with us, was in outfield. And actually, these guys will tell you also that the one thing that we used to really chuckle a lot, you know, we were all over the country playing ball and all over the state of Ohio and everywhere we went, when a lot of times a runner would be on first base and the next guy get a base hit, and most of the times you're going to go first to third. A lot of these teams didn't know Scott, so they try and go first to third on his arm, and he'd let loose of that arm, and they're out by 15 feet. And we would make a joke about it. You know, these guys don't know Guppy, and he had an arm that was just amazing, the way he played defense.
One of the, as I was trying to put the show together, one of the questions that people would ask was, where did the name Guppy come from? So we learned that this morning, Ron.
Yeah, I've known Scott since he was 5 years old, and I didn't know the name Gup at all, you know?
Dave Williams' moniker from his days there at Malone, and is that what you guys referred to him as?
Well, we had a lot of adjectives for him, but we went by Gup most of the time, yes.
Now, also joining us here today, Joe Monett. Joe, your thoughts on playing with Scott there in these years of softball. How many years would you have played with him?
I played with Scott probably about 20 years. I went to other tournaments. I remember him called me up early spring. He would have kids that he would teach over there at Northwest, and they would want to play in softball tournaments. So Gup would call me up and say, "Hey, I need another guy to, you know, show these kids how to play and stuff." And we'd go and play and stuff like that and have fun. But Gup was a great guy. I remember going down to Dayton, and my son at that time was probably about 5 or 6 or so, and you know, as a teacher that he was, he'd always take them to, you know, we played down there at the Dayton, where the airport museum was, and he would take them in there and show them different planes and stuff like that. And I mean, Gup was always a guy that always teaching things to young kids and stuff.
What name did you guys play under mostly? I'm sure you went through some different sponsors, but was there a primary team that you played under?
Well, probably the team that probably was the best of all the teams we played was the Hub Victor team. We started out as Varsity Isle. We had a good sponsor in Fred Belding there. We played for Walthers, Carl Walther. He was good, but Don Stanball was probably the best sponsor we ever had because we were playing over 100 games a year, and Don would supply us with uniforms and entry fees and everything, and always go with us. So that was the main team, Hub Victor.
Well, did you have a player by the name of Mike DeRocco on that team?
Not really. Mike never really played ball. We might have picked him up for one or two tournaments for pitching purposes, but as a full-time player, no.
Okay, well, we've asked Mike to join us here. Mike, welcome to the Sports Time Machine.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, we've gotten Scott through his young years there out in Fairmont territory and through McKinley and through Malone. When did you meet Scott?
I met Scott in the late 70s. He was on a church team, actually, and we played him in some tournaments, and I really tried to get him on my team. I was playing for Esber's Lounge at the time. We got him on our team, and he played a few years, and you could tell he was a superior player to everybody in the league. Then I played with him on Varsity Isle. I didn't get a chance to play on Hub Victor as it was spoken there, but and then I got a team back in 2010. I put some 40 and 50-year-old guys, and we played for Authors Cafe, and we were called the Green Team. We played against 20-year-olds, and, we can take one base at a time. They were taking two bases, but we ended up winning the championship. And if you first met Scott Gephart, you immediately liked him. You liked the guy right off the bat. But when you got to know him, you started loving the guy. And I had a love for him. He was a great guy, and I was a privilege to play with him.
Did he have a nickname for you?
Just Mikey. You say, Mikey, let's go, buddy. And I coached and I pitched, and he did catch. Somebody was talking about catching. He did catch a few games in the latter years here. He played for me. He didn't play this year with us, but he played last year and the last 4 years with us. And I always felt when he was on my team, we could beat anybody. We had a chance because he was our ace. He was my ace in the hole. He came through one year in that 2010 season. We were down by 3 runs down at Kurtzfield, and this team was kicking us pretty good, and we ended up getting close. He had a grand slam, and we started talking, hey, let's go down and celebrate the Walters. You want to go down? He said, well, I wasn't, but I am now. So it was a treat to play with him.
Well, I know that your relationship with Scott was very special from talking to his wife, Judy, as is the case here with Ted Majestic, Joe Monette, and Mike Bedell. Thank you to all you guys for helping us develop this segment about the slow pitch softball, and perhaps there's some last remarks here. Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to say one thing in closing here. Scott was a really good friend of mine, and I roomed with him all over the place, and there was many nights we'd sit in our rooms and talk, and, we're talking softball, but Scott was a great family man. He loved his boys so much, and his wife, Judy, meant the world to him. And he told me many, many times that when he met her, that was a turning point in his life that made him such a better person. So even though it's not nothing to do with softball, I'd like to throw that in there.
Well, I'm so glad that you did, and I would second that from just the association that I had with Scott, no doubt about
Amen.
that. Ron, we wanted to talk a little bit about the fundraiser, and the fundraiser is for the purpose of providing a college scholarship. And big night, what's the date of this fundraiser?
Okay, I'm looking at the flyer right now where Scott's boy was the graphic artist, Craig. And the fundraiser is on November 22nd from 5 to midnight at the old Meadow Lake, formerly the Rafters, now called Ed's Pub and Party Center. And it, like I said, it starts at 5 and it's till midnight. There is a suggested donation of $10. And the lead band, the first one that's going to go on, is the band Onyx, and that happens to be Scott's son Cody. And then the other bands that will be on will be the Old School Rockers, the Jukebox Jokers, Dark Side of the Moon. Judy was telling me that that's kind of like the Pink Floyd group. So looks like it would be a good night for a good cause in the name of a good person.
Okay, so to summarize, we want everybody to get out to EB's Pub and Party Center. That's at the Meadow Lake Golf Course. It was formerly Rafters. It's right out there on that's Middle Branch Road, I think. Martindale. EB's Pub and Party Center. The night is November 22nd. You could come between 5 and midnight. I'm going to be there because I don't want to miss these bands. Cody is he's certainly taking after his dad as a musician.
Yeah.
I heard him play with the Old School Rockers, filling in for his dad. The opening band Onyx, that's the one that Cody's playing with. And then you got the Jukebox Jokers and Dark Side of the Moon. We're going to have a great time. We're going to raise a lot of money. And if somebody would want to make a donation, please give us a call, or you could do that online. That's www.gupscholarship.org. Thank you for listening to this. Join us on November 22nd between 5 and midnight, anytime in there. That Time Machine will be back in just a moment.
Where's the Time Machine going to take us today?
Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Welcome back to the Sports Time Machine. This is Larry Hackenberg with my co-host Ron Lemmo as we pay special tribute to the great Scott Gephart. Ron, I was so glad for the comments that were emotionally spoken by Mike Bedell about these boys and about his great wife, Judy.
Yeah, once again, it means a lot to me, too.
We're joined by the band.
Yeehaw!
Band by the name of the Old School Rockers. Had the enjoyment of watching them play at Bud's Corner. This was after Scott had passed away, and it was a very emotionally touching night for all that were in attendance, and I'm sure for these great musicians, because Craig Gephart played in Scott's place, and then Cody took his turn and played in Scott's place. Welcome to the Sports Time Machine, and I'm going to let you mention the names here, Ron.
Okay, the Old School Rockers. Ted Schilling, Moody Fatah, Nick Calhoun, and Gary Begg.
Guys, boy, you are stars with this music that you're able to produce for people's enjoyment. Can we talk first here about what you saw in Scott as a musician as part of this band? What did he bring to it? What function did he have? And how was it for him as a band member?
It's been amazing to sit here this morning in the comparisons that parallel Scott as an athlete, as a musician, the team player. It just hit me like a ton of bricks.
I think mostly what you find is Scott was always there in support of anybody. You know, you'd make a mistake. A lot of musicians in the days, they used to give you the old dog eye, I guess is what they used to call it. But Scott would come up and pat you on the back and say, hey, it's okay, you know, come on, let's go, let's get it done.
And he was a heck of a leader. I mean, he brought everybody together, and he was just such an inspiring guy. I mean, I know he was coach for so long, and he was kind of our coach. I mean, he really brought us all together, and he made us better as performers, you know, just by knowing him.
Now, in terms of his function in the band, what would you call what he did? Was that a bass guitar?
Yeah. Yeah, he was our bass player.
Yeah, but he was more than that. He was the nucleus of the five of us. You know,
he never gave that impression in telling me about what you guys were doing.
You know, it's so funny. No matter where we play today, even with Scott's passing, there's always somebody that comes up and says, "Hey, don't I know you? Didn't you play with Scott Gephart?"
Right, and that's how it was. Everywhere we went, I was amazed that everywhere we'd ever gone, there was somebody that knew Scott. Or even if in just a general conversation, I'd bring up a name with somebody I worked with or used to work with, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I used to play softball with him." I mean, everybody knew Scott, and I never met anyone who had a bad word to say about Scott. Scott was just one of the greatest guys I'd ever met. And honestly, sincerely, he was the nicest guy I've ever met.
Larry, I remember the voice messages that he'd leave about where his band was playing. Such enthusiasm he had.
Oh yeah, he was. He really pushed publicity for the band. I mean, like crazy. And everybody he talked to, that's one of the first things he'd ever mention is where we're playing, when we're playing. Hey, you got to come out. You got to come out and check us out. We're great.
I think he talked about each and every one of you guys to me. We would talk every 4 or 5 months maybe, and things would have changed a little bit with the band, and there was any change that occurred, any new addition to the band, he was telling me how great you guys were, and it was always deferring any of the ability to make music to you guys and away from himself.
You know, it's funny because he talked like that, but in reality, that's not what it was. I mean, it would be at a rehearsal, or, you know, you'd make a mistake, or, you know, hey guys, let's try this, or let's try that. I mean, he was always looking to move us to the next level. And I can, as Ted was saying, you could kind of see that relationship or that correlation between his athletic career and his musical endeavors. They were almost one and the same. His personality.
Want to hear from Moody Fatah. Moody, I can remember Scott telling me about you. What do you do in the band?
Well, I'm the drummer, and I met Scott a while ago, and I remember looking at him, and he'd always tell me, he says, one day we're going to be in a band together. And 3 months later, it was fantastic. Still is. I mean, Scott is the band. Anytime you say Old School Rockers, you see Scott.
So what was the date that you guys came together? I followed Scott when he was doing the Fairmont Boys, and then he was telling me about the Old School Rockers. When did that take place?
Well, this was this happened around 2011, I believe. I was involved. Scott was involved, and Cody also was involved in. It was called Chris Wintrip's. He's a local musician. Chris Wintrip's.
Is he ever?
Yeah, Guitar Academy, and we were all involved in that. And I was just a vocalist, and Chris had called me and said, "Hey, I know a guy that he's in a band, and they're having an issue with their singer. Their singer's not going to be available, and they were wanting to know if I could pick up some gigs, and they wanted to hear me. So I said, yeah, and I really just kind of didn't think I was going to do it because when I had first got involved in this, I was such an introvert, and I didn't go out. Talking like this would be impossible for me. But so
we'd have never known.
I mean, within 10 minutes of hanging up from Chris, Scott called, and you know, the guy's so nice, and he's just he conned me into coming out to Canton and practicing, and sitting in for a rehearsal, and you know, next thing I know, I'm involved in this band, and I'm their lead singer.
Ted? Neat thing about the band is all of us but Gary started playing our instruments as adults. And there was just something there that we had to lean on each other to support each other. And Scott told everybody it wasn't his band, but it was. You know, and that was our fear moving forward, is what we would do without Scott. He booked everything. We've played places in the last couple of months we really didn't even know who the contact was to pay us. Scott did all that stuff for us. I used to tell people, on the sheer number of people that Scott knew, I really, honestly think he could have ran for mayor in the city of Canton and competed without any political experience.
Let's try to really get across to the folks that are listening how special this November 22nd is going to be. You guys played Rafters, I know. That's familiar to you. Pretty neat place out there. Let's talk about. Let's get somebody interested in coming out and joining us there that night.
Well, first, thanks to Eric Brooks, EB's Party Center, and Rick Cunningham for donating the space. They've been wonderful to work with and have just done everything that Judy has asked, and that's made it get it off the ground, definitely.
And you're going to have a great lineup of bands, starting with Cody's band, Onyx. Us, of course. You've got the Jukebox Jokers with Chris Wintrip and the Dark Side of the Moon Pink Floyd tribute band, which is they're a phenomenal group. So, I mean, you've got that to look forward. And there's going to be auctions, 50-50 drawings, that sort of thing. I mean, it's going to be a fun night. It's going to be a blast.
Kind of a musical history Scott came from. I think Doug's coming out to play.
Oh,
too.
Yeah. And Tom.
Yep. So, kind of where Scott came from musically. The guys in Dark Side know him. The saxophone player from that band is The Connection and played with the Old School Rockers when we were first starting out on a number of gigs. So, and of course, we're all together because of Scott and Chris Wintrip.
Right. Are there musical arrangements that the Old School Rockers play that we could tell the listeners about, that to give them an idea of the type of music that they're going to enjoy when they come with us on November 22nd? That's some psychology I'm using there, Lemmo. It's called the assumed close. What are we going to hear from the Old School Rockers?
It's classic rock.
Classic rock. You're going to hear some ZZ Top, Billy Joel, anything from the 60s on up to 80s, maybe a couple things a little more current, but you're going to hear some Joe Walsh, definitely. You're going to hear a little bit of Elvis Presley.
Right.
It's the other bands run the gamut. I mean, the Jukebox Jokers play some more modern stuff and some classic rock. And of course, Dark Side plays Pink Floyd, and Onyx, they also play classic rock. So.
Are you going to be there, Lemmo?
Yes, I am. But remember, Scott Gephart's name is tied to this whole thing.
Yes, definitely. And we can't forget that, Scott Gephart.
So we want to be able to pitch in a little bit, all of us, and really do something nice for student in terms of a scholarship. And what a way to honor Scott, who was really, really serious as an educator. If you don't know, Scott was a 5th grade teacher for all those years, all in the Northwest District.
That fits us.
That explains it.
That's why he liked you guys. He did share that with me.
Larry, I don't know if you knew this, though. Scott is my son-in-law, Justin's uncle. So through marriage, my daughter is a niece.
So is that how you knew that we were going to do this show before I called you?
Yes, I did. I saw things from Judy. My wife was telling me things that Judy had posted. And truthfully, Larry, when it came up, I thought, gosh, it was Larry would ask me to co-host with him. And by God, the next day you had called me, and I couldn't be happier.
Well, it's been really fun for me here today. I love the segment that we did about the Fairmont boys out there, and
Fighting Torches.
Canton McKinley, the Malone with Marzik and Coach Reinhardt, fantastic. The softball, and it's been really, really great having you guys in the studio.
Thank you.
Get to hobnob a little bit with the successful musicians, Ron. We don't get to do that every single day. Guys, do you have a final thought here as we pay tribute to Scott Gephart?
If you're interested in the fundraiser, you can find information out on Facebook. We're on Facebook, the Old School Rockers. So, and we can point you in the right direction if you want to get on there, and we'll let you know who to contact.
I would like to say that still miss Scott every day. Thank you guys for doing what you did. to help promote the benefit, and also like to say that dearly love Scott's wife Judy. She's handled herself with the utmost grace,
amazing,
and she is very inspiring.
As Scott was.
Yep, both of them.
Moody, do we have some final words from the drummer?
Number one, I want to thank you for this today in honor of Scott. Scott's been fantastic. I mean, I can't say anything nobody already knows about him. So thank you all very much for supporting Scott.
Yeah, great show, guys.
Ron, next week, another interesting little different kind of thing here. Sports Time Machine. What's more the center of sports in the history of Stark County than the YMCA?
Oh, wow.
We're going back into the 1800s with some of that history. No first-hand accounts of that. We looked, though. We tried. We're going to be talking about YMCA at the basketball, where they had a team that beat Ohio State back in the early 1900s. We're going to have great guests like Bob Belden, Jim Conley, tremendous cast of characters, Dick Kempthorne, Bill Cumler, and we're going to go through all that history of the YMCA as they've been a centerpiece of sports in Stark County. Tim Schetzer's helped put that together. Our who was I? Who was he today? That correct answer was my good friend Garth Evans, who we lost back in 2010.
Oh, I remember when Garth played at Lincoln High School.
Garth was another guy a lot like Scott Gephart. Really didn't get to play much in high school, but matured later. And to say that Garth was a horse is not an overstatement.
It would be an understatement, believe me.
Thanks for joining us here today as we've paid tribute to one of our great ones.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.